responds to anger in the same way, right? And when you think of anger, you think of somebody who's lashing out at someone who loses their temper. You might not think that anger is the thing that really causes me, right, to that drives the things that I have that are quote unquote wrong with me. Anger can be behind different things like pettiness, like anxiousness, being passive. Different people have different ways that they express their anger, but anger still is the root cause. And I just want to highlight this just so when a person is evaluating themselves and they say, well, anger is not something that I struggle with. Many times it can be, it just manifests itself in a different way. As in when a person gets angry, they don't necessarily lash out and attack another person. But when a person gets angry, sometimes it just comes out in a different way, but it's fueled sort of by anger. Stubbornness is probably being a great example of this. That somebody's very stubborn in terms of how they think about another person, and they won't let it go because they're so angry at that person. But then they come up with a rationalization and they're justifying, well, this person did this to me, and therefore I'm going to act in this certain way. And really it's fueled by anger. But the anger is taking advantage of their stubbornnness and taking advantage of their intellect to come up with some crazy rationale of why. At the end of the day, it's really the anger that's stemming from a person. So today with anxiety and there's so many different words that we can come up with that we can sort of mask anger as a whole. But he makes a really good point over here. Okay, so he's going to go and talk about how to attack this trait itself. This allows people to absolve themselves of the negative sensitivity of the character trait. Now, why is that? Because anger is from my experience, nobody walks around saying, I was born a very angry person. So they try to rationalize anger by saying I was born an angry person, therefore this is how I am. You know that, and you've learned with me, I love ripping on those people that are like, this is just the way I am, and if you don't like it, love me, leave me, all that stuff. Which is complete and total garbage. It's nonsense. It's stupidity, because you have the ability to mold yourself any way that you want. Being naturally a certain way is not an excuse for you to be able to behave in any manner that you want. For sure not. So if a person doesn't say I'm an angry person, but they say I'm I'm a nervous person, or this makes me anxious. I don't want to go and be involved in such and stuff because it makes me very nervous and they get me very agitated and because I'm a very nervous person. But really, what they're trying to do is absolve themselves of that midah. They're saying it's not an issue with me. I don't have that problem per se, because it's a part of me. So anger is not as gracious when you say like, oh, I'm just an angry person. But when you mask anger and other things, then it's like, oh, I'm just an agitated person. I'm a nervous person. I'm a lazy person, as opposed to. So you have to really get to the core when you're evaluating yourself and recognizing it. They'll say, well, it's just an innate psychological weakness, not a negative character trait that I'm responsible for improving. Now, the issue with that, and somebody who's growth-oriented is going to absolutely hate the notion of this is just the way that I am and I'm handicapped by it. I can't change myself because this is the way that I am. It's a person looking to absolve themselves of their responsibility. Okay, it's true that anger is aroused by agitated nerves. Let's analyze. So he's going to make an excellent point. He's going to make an excellent point over here, which is really common sense, but you'll see sort of where he's going with it. But let's analyze why it is that when a Gentile's anger is provoked against him, he is even ready to kill someone, whereas a simple Jew will only use physical force, and a Jew who's on a higher level, spiritual level, will neither kill nor hit, but will only fumigate and use harsh language. Despite the fact that all their nerves are suffer from the same weakness, they do not all resort to the same negative behaviors while they are angry. What is he saying here? He's saying that every single person can get agitated by the actions of others. But yet there are some people who they get so angry that they go out and they kill. And there's other people who will just resort to just basic violence. And there's other people who resort to harsh language. And what he didn't say, which is true as well, is that there are certain people out there who it's very hard to get them angry because they worked on their character. So how can it be that every person was born with the same agitation? You can get pretty much anyone angry if you try hard enough, yet the response is different. And if the response is different, it means that nobody sort of experiences this. You can experience the same thing and have a different reaction. We all see the sun rise in the morning. Some of us are really appreciative of it. Other people, think it's a terrible day. So it really, every person is baseline has similarities, but the way that a person responds and reacts to situations is entirely up to them through the process of how they mold themselves. The answer is quite simple. When a person is awake, he can place limits on himself that will continue to function even once he's fallen asleep. That's why when he rolls around in his bed and he reaches the edge of the bed, he immediately moves back in the other direction rather than falling onto the floor. That only happens when I guess you're really little. Even though he's asleep and his intellect is not functioning, the awareness that the awareness that he has while he's awake continues to limit the movements, even when his conscious is unaware. And that is direct conditioning of oneself. If you're not paying attention in your car and you're driving to the same place you drive every day, you don't need to be paying attention. Your body will sort of just do it for you. Why? Because that's how you grow. That's how you condition yourself. When you do a certain thing, a certain act over and over again, you are conditioning yourself to pick up. And children do this naturally as well. If a kid puts his hand on something that's really hot, you see this with animals as well, right? I caught a cat one time on my porch. I had a cat trapper. I put the food in there. They walked in and they got caught. I was going to bring them to the whatever, the pound, the vet, whatever. And then I think my sister let it out of the cage accidentally. And needless to say, I was never able to recapture it again, because even though there was food inside, the cat didn't go within 10 feet of this device, because it just needed to happen once. They recognized that was bad for them, and they conditioned themselves to adjust their behavior because of it, right? So our bodies are animalistic, and we have the same ability to be able to mold ourselves in any which way that we want. We have that ability, steering with our intellect. Our intellect can give us the ability to condition ourselves to become anything that we want to become. The same principle can be applied in all kinds of situations. The knowledge and understanding that are internalized within a person have the power to exercise total control over him, even when he's consciously unaware of that knowledge. A simple Jew can restrain not to kill someone else in anger, even when he's angry and his nerves are frazzled. A Jew who's on a higher level of spiritual consciousness will also refrain from using any kind of physical force. And after he spends time thinking and making a conscious decision not to get angry anymore, as we said before, then even when his nerves are frayed and he's not consciously aware of the concept he's internalized, his inner understanding will restrain him, and he won't even lash out verbally, despite the fact that his anger has been aroused. And I've experienced this personally firsthand, and it's a very, very cool feeling. It's a very freeing feeling when the natural response, because if someone gets you angry, there's that grace period where your reaction comes innate. It's just the way that you respond to that sort of stimuli until you condition yourself otherwise. So what's the first step? A person has to first make the conscious decision that he wants to work on his anger. He says, I don't want to respond in the way I realized afterwards when I get angry, I respond in this way. I don't want that anymore. That's the first thing. And then once you make that decision, you say, okay, I'm going to be more aware of the time that when I get angry. And then I'm going to try to create a grace period where I never respond in anger. I always give myself 5 minutes before to make sure that whatever response I'm going to have, whether I respond verbally, or, I don't know, physically you shouldn't respond unless, someone's attacking you, obviously, not your brother. But, you want to have that grace period so that you don't end up doing something that you're going to regret. So what do? You start to train yourself. The next time you're aware that you get angry, you mentally catch that you got angry, and then you impose on yourself. You say, okay, you made standards for yourself of what you're going to do. You have to stay quiet for 5 minutes. You're not allowed to do or say anything. And then you wait for 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes is a long time, even let's say 30 seconds, just so that you're creating a buffer zone. And if you continue to do that, you'll notice that one day, and this is what I'm saying, it's extremely cool when you see this, someone gets you upset, and without even thinking, your body automatically just resorts into this, I'm going to stop and quiet and just wait a little bit. And then your mind catches up and say, whoa, I didn't even think to do that this time. It just happened on its own. That's effective conditioning on yourself. You've now changed yourself in terms of the way that you respond. When a person gets training for something, what is the training? In the army or police officers are trained. What do? They go through repetitive actions that they're conditioning themselves that when they're in a certain situation, they're going to respond a certain way. If you want to test this out, next time you're in Israel, go up behind an IDF soldier and just grab them from behind and see what happens. I'm joking. Don't do that. But that's what happens when you condition yourself, that a person is trained now that without even thinking, their body is going to respond right away in a certain way. And that's when we talk about character development and growing and changing as a person. That's what we're talking about. You took a midah, you took a character trait, you put it under the microscope, you dissected it, you looked at yourself, how you respond in a certain situation, and then you've put things in place in order to adjust it. So he's going to offer He's going to offer a couple of strategies on how to go about this particular midah, and there's strategies on almost any midah. Anything that you feel like you struggle with, there's definitely strategies for a person to be able to condition themselves away from that behavior. Now, what happens if you have simmered hatred towards one in the group, right? You hate someone. There's a girl you can't stand. Every time she walks in the room, she gets you all upset. And you would like to rid yourself of that feeling, but you can't. You hate someone, you don't want to hate them, but you can't help but hate them, right? There's some reason, I think this is just, first nature for a girl, right? If you don't hate anyone, I'm kidding. But girls can be pretty vicious. You hate someone, you don't know why, but you just can't stand them. Obviously, as a result of your own hatred. Now, why would you want to absolve that? Now, there's two ways you can go about that. One is the wrong thing to do is you can rationalize and say this person deserves to be hated because of A, B, and C. But then two things. One is, why would you like somebody who you dislike to have control over your emotions? Why would you want to suffer the uncomfortable feeling of hatred towards another person? They have control over you more than you, even someone you don't like. That's first of all. And second of all, if you want to be the best person you can be, then for what reason? If a person's trying to justify their hatred for someone they should not hate, there are people who should be hated. And there are individuals out there who are evil, and you should be able to recognize the difference between good and evil. But we're talking about another Jew, a girl in the group who you hate them for their actions. I'll share the story again of what happened. My conversation in yeshiva, I know I mentioned it before, but I think it's really, really powerful, that I went to my rabbi my first year, my Shana Aleph in yeshiva, and I said, I have a really hard time with the concept of you should love every Jew like you love yourself. I struggle with it because there are Jews out there who are some pretty rotten people. Did anyone remember this story? I shared it? No? Whatever. Okay, so I said, how are you commanded to love someone that's a rotten person? This person steals, this person screws people over, they're very selfish, they don't care about anybody but themselves. They're a scumbag, and I'm supposed to love this person? The rabbi said to me like this. He said, you have two options. There's two buttons you can push. One button you push, he's killed immediately. He's removed from this world, and you have nothing. You won't have anything to do with him ever again. The world would rid itself of this scum. And the other button is that you push that would have him entirely, genuinely turn his entire character around. He would give up all the evil and bad things that he does and become an absolute good person. Which button would you push? And I said, obviously. He says, is there anybody in the world that you would push the first button? I said, no. Even the people that I think I hate, I would always push the second button, obviously. So he says, you don't hate the person themselves. You hate what they got caught up in. You hate the midah of stealing. You hate the midahs of selfishness that has completely engulfed and enslaved the person sort of beyond their control. And that's really giving the benefit of the doubt. You don't hate them. You hate what they sort of got caught up in, right? So I would think if you're a good person, if you're a growth-oriented person, you don't want, if someone asks you, hey, are there people out there that you would like to hate? Right? Do you want to hate people? No. Sometimes we find ourselves in that situation because we can't stand certain people for whatever reason, right? And obviously, if it has anything to do with ego, if it has anything to do with the fact that you're jealous of them at any level, then that's something for you to really, really look into for yourself. But this person is just a not good person. They didn't offend you. It's not personal. You just don't like that person. You hate that person, or maybe they did something offensive to you. Do you want to walk around with your entire life disliking that person? If you're a growth-oriented person, if you're somebody who wants to be the best they can be, then you would say, no, on black and white paper, I wouldn't want to hate this person. Yeah, Michelle.
Okay, so when you let's say a person steals every day, or they're super selfish and it's part of who they are, isn't that how who they become? They become that person, so it's practically themselves.
Right, but we can't make the assumption that in the same way we're sitting around talking about positive midos and proactively turning ourselves for the good, did this person sit down and say, I don't steal usually, but I want to become that stealer. And I'm going to work every day to steal to make it a part of me. While yes, it's conditioning themselves for evil, I don't think anybody sits down and makes that decision. I think they just get caught up in their desires, and without them even knowing, they fall into it to the point where they condition themselves for bad and they don't even realize that they did such a thing. And that's where we can have sort of mercy in our judgment and say, you didn't choose this. You had a very weak character. You never came on TJJ and you didn't know any better. And now year after year, you condition yourself to be not the greatest person out there. Does that warrant me to hate that person? No, I could hate stealing, but I shouldn't hate that person. Right? Because I don't think there's anybody out there who sits down and the same thing we do with good things, sits down and goes, I made a list of all the bad things I want to become. So let me start practicing every day. Like, I don't think there's a person in the world like that.
In general, you shouldn't hate anyone, but if they're like not even trying to change, like if they're just like being them, and just like being their own bad characters, and they're not trying to change, you're not supposed to hate them, but like you don't like love them, but you have to pretend that you love them because you have to do
Well,
what the Torah says.
right, you don't have to become best friends with anybody. You can choose who you want to surround your inner circle with. But you can also, these are two things. One is you can be favorable in your judgment of them, A, and B is you can find something positive to appreciate about that person, right? Not dislike them. Like every time someone calls me up to tell me that one of their friends hates me, and this happens constantly, like, by the way, this person, no, not that they hate me. They think I hate them. Right? I am so good at people thinking I hate them. It's not even funny. So every time I get that call and they say like, Avi, this person, they think you hate them. I'm like, I can't even think of like two people, who I would actually hate. I don't just like, I don't like hating people. I don't know why I come off as somebody who like, maybe I'm not so close with you. Maybe I didn't give you the attention that you felt you deserved. Maybe I didn't, put enough effort into my relationship with you, but to hate you, that requires a lot of effort. Nobody wants to be the person who goes around hating people. It's not an enjoyable thing in life in general. And if you're a good person, you don't want that. You don't want that. Even if you do hate someone, you still don't want to hate them.
I
So
don't think anyone really hates someone, because hate's a strong word. Like hate is like you wish like bad and you wish they get hurt. Like I don't think anyone really hates someone.
And I personally think most hatred doesn't come, like, for me, there's people I hate out there, non-Jews and public figures, and I hate them because of what they stand for, what they advocate for. But it comes from a place that I care a lot about what's right and what's true, and they're advocating for evil, and that develops, my personal, like, why I can't stand that particular person. But I think that for teenagers, for girls, when we're talking about like in our inner circles and on a Shabbaton, I think personally, I think most of that hatred comes from lack of good character flaws of the own person, jealousy, intimidation. Why are they so pretty? Yeah, Dory.
By the way, you sound just like Orel. I literally thought it was Orel speaking. I was like, what? I think what Taylor, right? What Taylor is saying, like, what do you do with someone who's just not willing to change? Like, okay, you give them the benefit of the doubt, and like you say that, okay, they're gonna change, and you press the second button and you say, okay, if this person had the ability to work on himself and he actually was working on himself, then okay, fine, I'll forgive him or I'll like him more. But like, what if someone is just not willing to change and he also doesn't find the wrong in what he's doing? How do you deal with that?
If I had the answer to that question, Dory, I would be a very successful Makarov. But unfortunately, you have no control over other people. The only thing you have control over is the way you respond to circumstances in life. So the only thing that we can focus on is my view on them. Yes, it's frustrating. There's nothing I can do. Like, I can't stand that they do that, but I have no control over them. The only thing I can do is work on my perspective of them and lead by example. That's really the only thing I can do. And I'm telling you, after years, like, you are utterly helpless to do anything else. Any type of intervention that's not going to be received will just damage things and make things worse. And it's if I had the ability to be able to make changes for other people in their character, oof, my God, I'd be getting to work constantly, but I can't. The only thing I can do is promote positive behavior, hopefully be a living example of what that looks like, and hopefully people will take notice. That's the only thing we can do. I tried to change the city. I couldn't. I can only focus on myself. In Judaism, the only thing we have bechira over, the free will, is over ourselves. So that's what he's going to address now. He's saying, okay, maybe this guy's a rotten guy. Nothing I can do about that, really. The only thing I can do is handle my hatred towards that person. And that's what he's going to come up with strategies now. But yeah, it's a very frustrating thing. I get extremely frustrated when you see unbelievable potential that is just going to waste and going out. It's something that drives me absolutely crazy. But not a lot of times, we are helpless to not to influence, but to change, to make them have changes. Okay. Obviously, as a result of the hatred you have towards them, you see various character flaws and wrongful action. So he's saying that if you dislike a person, the chances are is that you're going to hone in on their flaws, which is obvious, right? It's like, and I've seen this. I think people were like, "Oh, I hate this kid," and then they like judging the garbage out of them, and then next thing you know, they're best friends with them. It's like, wait, what happened? I thought you hated them. That's sort of how that works. First, remove the anger that lies in your heart. Easier said than done, okay? As in, focus on not feeling feelings of hatred. Focus on your own serenity, your menuchas hanefesh, which is the equanimity, the calmness of your own soul. Only then you'll be able to see if he really has more character flaws than you do. Right? So you get to say to yourself like this, okay, this person's such a rotten person. Maybe they're not. Maybe it's the fact that I dislike them that's causing me to see all this negative things about them. Maybe once I don't hate the person anymore, which we'll talk about how to do that in a second, then I can reevaluate and say, are they really as rotten as I think that they are? Right? Because judgment is a very easy thing. Judgment can fly all over the place. And if you hate a person, you're not going to judge them favorably at all. And I've been on the receiving end of that as well. You know, I told this to Sarah. I said, you know, the people that really dislike me, because there are people out there. Some people love me. Some people really dislike me. You know, what can you do? But I always say, like, the people who really dislike me are people who don't really know me well. That's what I find. It's like I don't have a really close relationship with that person that they like would know me enough. So I'm willing to bet that whatever it is that they hate me, they probably don't really know my intentions. They probably don't know really where my heart's at. A lot of times they don't give me the chance. You know, in Rosh Hashanah, I'll sometimes send out a message saying, you know, if you have an issue with me and I don't know about it, I'm not that I'm sorry. I hate those messages. Like, I'm so sorry for it. No, let me know, because at least give me the chance to be able to respond or like have that conversation, you know, because I don't know of it. And please, like, bring that up to me. But we do that. We find character flaws and people that we're not particularly very close with. But like we said, you want to clear that hatred from your heart, but aren't managing to do so. So try the following exercise. Okay, now he's going to present an idea, an exercise that a person can do, which is, it's tedious, and most people won't, like, I find that most people are like, all right, I don't hate that person enough to do this. But if you really, really are struggling and you can't get past the hatred for a person, because I think all the hatred we have for other people, is more or less superficial. And I think we can handle it on our own. But if you can't get past it, there's someone who you just can't get past, write him a letter. Don't send it, just hide it away somewhere. In that letter, disparage him as much as the angry snake you have inside wants to. As in, write the most horrible, disgusting, like, just absolutely go at them in this letter. For a few days, take the letter out and read it aloud. Imagine you are standing opposite the person you hate and that you're throwing all the slurs and insults in that letter straight into their face. Imagine. After a few days of this, the anger will surely leave your heart. And if you have minimal degree of sensitivity, you will run to make up with him too. Okay, so write this letter, stand in your room away from anyone, no one should ever hear this, and just tell this person, right, exactly what you think of them. And just let it rain. And do it every single day. I'm telling you, I think common sense can dictate this, but you can try it. It won't even be a week before you don't fear nearly as you're sort of like, wow, like, this is really intense. You ever been in an angry situation and then, like, you know, a few days later, you're like really embarrassed on the way that you acted, like the way that you responded? I could think back of times where I completely blew up at family members, or I made a huge scene in public because I got really angry. And I think about it afterwards. I look back at it and I'm like, oh my God, like, that's so embarrassing. You know, and if you've ever been in a place where someone completely loses their stuff and you're sitting there and they're just out of control, angry, yelling and screaming, and you're like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing for them, right? That's you. You're that guy when that happens. So write this letter, stand in front of, you know, in your room, in front of your mirror, whatever, and just let it have it on this person. And you'll see that not only will the anger eventually go away, but you're also going to start to feel bad. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying these things about this person, thinking about this person. And then it'll cause a person to awake in their own racham, in their mercy, and to reconnect with them. So Don't be astonished by this advice. So this is interesting, because back in the day, right, you would be accused of, we didn't have this, you have to appreciate, we didn't have the psychology teachings we have today, where it's a science where you can sort of break down the human psyche and how this works. So he says like this: don't say this advice is one of two things. Either it's a lie or it's witchcraft, right? Don't say that this advice is magic. Can it be that I write an insulting letter and even read it out loud and then want to recoil and even appease the person? No, it's not a lie. It's not witchcraft. This is the way the human psyche works. When a person disparages and insults someone he hates, his anger dissipates slightly. And he gets this from Sifrei Tzadikim, Parshas Vayigash, quoting the Ashlich on the verse, "The Eternal relented." So he's saying that this is the natural course of the human being psyche. But since the other ones answer him back and infuriates him over again, right? As in, when you do it this way, the person can't respond to you. So it's just you, and eventually you're going to dissipate your own anger. The reason why conflicts continue is because you're finding new stuff. You ever get in a fight with someone where you're so angry at them for the way they responded, but you can't even remember the original thing, like why you got into an argument in the first place? Right? When you get married, you will absolutely see that to be true. You'll find yourself like, you have this argument going on and you're arguing about the response of the anger that, and you're just like, what did this even, I don't even remember, because it's so stupid, right? So when a person gets, into a place, and this is a principle in therapy. Why do we go to therapy to talk? Because when you talk, you're taking the weight off of the steam out of the engine. You're talking yourself out of the emotions that you feel. And that's why people end up feeling better when they talk about things. Yay. However, once you've written this scarring letter and expressed your extreme animosity, and you have read it aloud and reared the person, your anger will subside somewhat. On the second day, when your anger is lessened, you will read the same letter again with all your invectives. Yay, English. As you lash out according to the way that you originally felt when your anger was great, your heart will begin to have guilt pangs on its own, and it will say, do you really have to say all these awful things? You're going to start to feel guilty because you're a good person. You're like, wow, I cannot believe that I'm saying this about someone. It's when you're not as angry anymore and you continue to say those words, you're like, whoa. If you ever did this, you're really angry and journal it, and then you look back at a week and you say, wow, like that was really intense. I don't feel that way anymore. I don't. You will no longer be able to read all the degrading comments in the same degree of anger as you did on the first day. And if a person forces themselves to, it's just pure stubbornness. But since you've decided that you're going to read it and your anger hasn't dissipated completely, you force yourself to read it through. On the third day, your anger will dissipate even further, and you won't be able to read the letter anymore. It might not be the third day. It might be longer than that, depending on the person. You'll regret that you exposed yourself like that and revealed and cursed the other person so viciously, and you look at yourself looking for ways to patch things up with him so you'll make peace. Someone who is naturally good-hearted person will resolve things quickly, while someone who is stubborn may need to read the letter a few more times. But with God's help, this will help everyone involved to make amends. However, you shouldn't resort to writing this letter very often, and when you do, be extremely careful not to lose it, and make sure nobody sees it, even your closest friends, because if the person you wrote about finds out what you wrote, he'll become extremely angry at you, and that's a no-no. Right? You have to be very careful with this. So this is a method that I personally think that there's nobody we hate enough that we don't want to, but we can't stop hating them, that we need to resort to a method like this. But every single Mida has their method, their methodology, where it's like, I want to work on this. Here is the strategy. Here is a way for us to be able to do it and to attack it, right? But you have to have self-awareness. You have to know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. If you know what your weaknesses are and you know what you want to work on specifically, then you're able to create a strategy for that thing. We talked about earlier in the Sefer, strategies to be able to improve and add positive things. And now we're talking about strategies to be able to alleviate ourselves of the negative things. So we're at the end, one last paragraph here. Like we said earlier, you can find practical solutions for everything. For example, let's say you're trying to work on your laziness that manifests itself in oversleeping because you really love to sleep. Or you're exhausted because you worked hard on a specific day and you're afraid you might oversleep the next morning. Try the following. Don't sleep lengthwise on your bed. Sleep widthwise and rest your feet on a chair. As soon as you wake up in the morning, push the chair away from your feet and you'll already be in the half-standing position. But only do this if it won't adversely affect your health. If it will make you tired And if it won't make you tired the entire day because you didn't sleep well at night, in any case, you shouldn't do this more than twice a week. So there's the thing. If a person's laziness and they're worried about getting up in the morning, sleep sideways on your bed with your feet on your chair. Now, again, you have to be holding in a place where you really, really want to address a certain issue to be able to go to sort of some sort of a level. That can be a little bit considered extreme, but who cares? If you want to really, really tackle and take on a certain thing, then yeah, then you're going to go to whatever strategies that you can to be able to alleviate yourself of this. Again, a person's drive for self-development is really going to dictate how hard and how much effort they put into working on themselves, which is why a person should be inspired and inspire themselves to want to be the best they can be and to work on themselves. God willing, we should all have the wherewithal and the strength to be able to continue to work on ourselves, that our negative character traits will never rest, they'll never sleep. Even the things that we think that we've perfected have a way to come back later on in life. Right? But if we maintain a growth-oriented attitude and we involve ourselves in learnings of Musar and friends and environments of people who will strive us to be the best versions of ourselves, then we will always be able to do that throughout the course of our life. Life is looked at as a limited time, where we have a limited time in this world. And I use the example of being in that tube where you're grabbing tickets. Our job is to grab as much growth, merit, and accomplish as much as we can while we're here on this world. And there is absolutely nothing more valuable for a person to build on this world, better than any big institution out there, than a person perfecting their character. I'm a firm believer that a person's effect that they'll have externally is directly correlated to the success that they have internally. So we should all be matzliach in that journey, and Hashem should always give us strength. Dory, thanks for joining us. You're more than welcome to continue to join us on a week-to-week basis. We're going to go back to 5:00 on Tuesdays generally, but your grandfather Moshe Ben Avram his neshama should have an aliyah. And now that he's passed on, all the great things that you do over there at IDC for the Jewish community that he wasn't able to really see or take part in, or what he told him, he's able to see everything now on a day-to-day. And that's, I'm sure he's extremely, extremely proud of you. So it's good to see you. Thank you, everyone, for coming through. And